I used to work in a public library. This one time I had to close, and I ended up staying a little later to help out one of my bosses with some stuff for brownie points. I was walking down a hallway on the ground floor, and I swear, the lights started turning off as I passed them, one by one. I freaked out and ran for it. I made sure to stay by my boss for a while after that, because being around people makes the fear of the supernatural go away for me. But I didn't say anything. Eventually, I convinced myself it was probably just a coincidence with the place closing, and I felt a little better. Later that night, I had to get something from an office on the top floor. I went up there, and the office was totally trashed, even though all the other offices in the building were fine. I would have just brushed it off, but the document I needed was sitting on top of the pile, facing so someone walking in could read it. I grabbed it and brought it to my boss, again saying nothing. But before I could hand him the paper, he handed me the key and apologized for not giving it to me sooner, because you need that key to get into the office. At this point, I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to say ghosts, so I put on my clever cap and asked, "Is that the only key? Because I had the paper right here, and the door was open when I got there." I told him about how I'd found the office a wreck, and he concluded we had a burglar, and we went outside to call the cops. They didn't find anything. I'm sure there's a million rational explanations, but it still creeped me out. This next one's better, I promise. So, in the break room in this same library, one wall was completely covered in blinds that were always kept closed. One day, me and all the other teens working there were in this room, because we all took our breaks at the same time. I got the urge to see some sunlight, so I decided to open the blinds. The windows behind it were pitch black, as if they were painted. It was 3 p.m. in June. The sun was shining, and the break room shared a wall with the kids' book room, which had windows that could see outside no problem. I pointed this out to everybody, and we realized that no one had ever opened those blinds, despite more than one person in the room having been there for over 3 years. We all got just a little bit creeped out. Just a little. We worked in this building. We were in a big group of people, and we'd been in this room like a million times before. One girl, we can call her Becky, suggested that maybe the windows were just painted for some reason, and that if we opened them, we'd see the beautiful day outside. So this other coworker of mine, we'll call him Chris, he was the big man in the room, and said, "Yeah, I'll open it." And he walked right up and did so. And we did not see a beautiful day. What we saw was an old, old room that none of us were aware of. It was so dusty I doubt it saw a human touch in 40 years. Like, the whole room was gray, it was so dusty. And the room was, get this, filled with toys. There was a big ladybug-shaped sandbox, a bicycle, a pile of assorted train toys. There was this small stack of thin books, like kids' books. It gave me one of those nasty, creepy feelings just looking at it. I was reminded of every creepy child I had ever seen in a movie, and I think everyone else was too. because we all looked at each other, either scared and confused or just plain scared. And Becky, she looks in and looks around in there and says, "Hey, there's no door in this room." I remember her saying that distinctly. It's like a tape recording in my head because everything so far was just weird, but that sentence is where it got creepy. The break room was separated from this creepy room by a wall with windows in it. Why on earth would anybody wall off a bunch of kids' toys and install windows that looked into the walled-off room? It occurred to me at about this time that the light from the break room made it really easy to see into the toy room. Like, it wasn't dark in there at all. So why were the windows pitch black? Shouldn't the light have gone through them? And shouldn't I have been able to see the other room when I moved the blinds? So I put my hand on one side of an open window and my head on the other, and sure enough, I could see through it plain as day. I closed the window, and it was pitch black again. I pointed this out to everyone else, and they were completely baffled. About that time, we realized our break was over a few minutes ago, and we went back to the library proper. When we got there, our boss, not the same one I talked about before, this one was a bit of a slave driver, got mad and asked why we were all late. Another coworker, Rob, told her we found the weird room behind the windows in the break room. Her response? "Oh, that." And she dropped it. This was a woman who would lecture a room full of people about the littlest thing, like if somebody left without writing on their sign-out sheet. But when that whole building was at DEFCON 1, that woman didn't want to talk about that room. Sometime later, we're all in the break room again, and someone who wasn't there last time wants to see it. I'm still creeped out, but it's one of those creeped outs where you want to expose someone else to it, to make sure that fear is the proper response and you're not just going crazy. So I say sure, and open the blinds, and an impossibly dark window. And this guy looks around, just having a pretty normal "we found a weird thing" reaction. Whoa, why is this here? This is cool. Stuff like that. A minute or two later, Chris opens up another one, and he looks into it for a few minutes, then turns to me and goes, "Hey, this room, it was super dusty last time, right?" I say, "Yeah," because it was, and I start to see what he's getting at. So I open a window and look through for myself. And this room is clean. Like spick and span, perfectly clean. Mrs. Brady and Alice had been through this room. Or at least that's what it looked like. When I say this room was cleaned, it was really just dusted. The dust was gone and everything was shiny and new. But the toys in that book pile were left in their haphazard positions. And that's why it frightened us so bad. Human beings organize when they clean, especially when what they're cleaning is a public building that they work at, which is the only way I could see that room being cleaned having a rational explanation. I said as much, and all the people who were there last time opened windows and looked through, and all had minor freakouts. Chris shut his window and said, "I think I'm going to end my break early today." Everyone in the room decided that was a good idea, and we shut our windows, shut the blinds, and left, all in a silence that no one wanted to break. On the way back, we passed a maintenance guy, and Becky asks him, "Hey, what's with that walled-off room in the break room?" And he just stared at us, with this expression on his face that could have been shock or fear, but either way, it was strong. And I guess Becky thought he was confused, because she said, "The one with all the old toys," and he cut her off and said, Don't go in there, kids," and walked off. I didn't work the next day, but I did the Monday after. When I got there, Chris came up to me and said, "We're not allowed to take all our breaks at the same time anymore." A few days had passed, and I'd convinced myself that the toy room was just some kind of crazy set of coincidences, and that it didn't really matter. So I was just responding to the news of a boss taking away an employee privilege. I probably said something like, "Man, that's lame." I don't even remember what I said because it's that unimportant. But that same day, me and Chris and 2 other people were slacking off in one of the aisles, and we'd been talking about this change all day. So I asked, "Hey, why do you guys all start taking your breaks at the same time in the first place?" And Chris said, "Because we always felt creeped out in the break room alone, like we were being watched."